Welcome into the Hard Count. It is Thursday, January 16th, 2025. The show that also would love to know where Lou Holtz is right now. It's National Championship Week, baby. You're going to be in Atlanta the next time you see us on your computer screen or your Roku or wherever you're watching. So glad to have you dialed in, man. We only got 4 quarters left of ball. We got a lot to talk about within those 4 quarters. Got a lot to talk about within the world of college football today. Some exit meetings that we are continuing to have on this show, which is not quite as morbid as it sounds. What's the status right now in Oklahoma and USC? We'll get to that. The quarterback matchup in this game is phenomenal when it comes to Ohio State and Notre Dame. We'll give you our thoughts there. I think some changes are around the corner now. They are 110%, probably 60% assurance that we're going to have some changes in college football. I got some thoughts from y'all on the Twitter sphere. I asked this question on my Twitter this morning. I gave the timeline within the next 3 years because we could do the whole, hey, what does college football look like in 20 years and 50 years? What about the most immediate changes? We'll give you our thoughts there. But I want to start with this, man. If you follow the On3 social account, one, phenomenal. You're in the know for all things college football, all things college sports all the time. If you're not yet following there, make sure you do that. But there was a graphic that dropped yesterday on the On3 socials of what Lou Holtz had to say about Ryan Day. And Lou Holtz, from his Twitter account, says, quote, "If Notre Dame doesn't win, it's because we want to preserve Ryan Day's job." New paragraph. "I was originally going to be at the game in spirit, but now I'll be dragging my body along as well." There's a lot to unpack here. One, this is like as a standalone, kind of wild, definitely hilarious. But if you are unfamiliar with the history of Ryan Day and Lou Holtz, we'll give a quick rundown here. Last year, Pat McAfee show, College Game Day, both in South Bend, Indiana, when Ohio State goes to South Bend, Indiana to play Notre Dame. And on the Pat McAfee show, I guess this was the Friday before, Lou Holtz does a sit-down interview with a counterpart, of Pat McAfee's that is dressed as Lou Holtz, giving a Lou Holtz impersonation, talking about the game, talking about Notre Dame, Ohio State. Lou Holtz, obviously, with some very deep Notre Dame ties, gives his thoughts on the game, and then said something that sparked a lot of emotion on the Ohio State side, saying, quote, "You look at Coach Day, everyone that beats him does so because they're more physical than Ohio State." What are we doing there? Essentially calling out the toughness and manhood of this Ohio State Buckeye football team. Post-game, Ohio State wins on a short yardage touchdown from Chip Trainum. Ryan Day jumps on the mic and shouts, I want to know where Lou Holtz is right now. What he said about our football team is ridiculous. I cannot believe he said that. We're a tough football team. I mean, just chest out, letting his thoughts known, and making sure that everybody knew that Ohio State was, in fact, a tough physical football team. So then this week, the week of the national championship game, Ohio State and Notre Dame obviously had to get after it. Someone asked Ryan Day during his media availability if he and Lou Holtz ever patched things up. Like, hey, y'all, that was one thing. It was kind of a heat-of-the-moment thing for Lou Holtz and obviously a heat-of-the-moment thing for you. I would imagine there was some of this context given for this question. Had you patched things up with Lou? Ryan Day, one-word answer, no. All right, so that still seems to be a tender spot. Not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying there seems to be some sort of raw emotion there from what I can gather giving a one-word answer. Then Lou Holtz doubles down this week with that tweet and says we want to preserve Ryan Day's job if we don't win the game. There's a lot here, man. First of all, Lou Holtz is 88 years old, man. Just turned 88 January 6th of this year. So, Lou, if you're watching, happy birthday. But, like, Lou, I hope I have this level of don't give a fudge at 88 years old, man. I hope I'm out here tweeting at head coaches or tweeting at former colleagues. Like, I hope I have this level of, like, this is me. These are my thoughts. I'm putting them out there for you. I don't care what the kickback is, or I don't care that we lost to y'all last time. I don't care that Notre Dame's 8.5-point dog. So Lou Holtz, from what I can gather, is in full talk his cash mode plus full fan mode. Like, obviously, Lou Holtz, having been the coach of Notre Dame for a long time, has some ties there with the Irish and clearly wants the Irish to win. Now he's going to the game, and as he says, dragging his body along as well, which is a wild line in itself. What I got to thinking about, though, is like Lou Holtz at his core, man, he's in fan mode right now. Like, yes, he was at Notre Dame, and he's got those ties we just mentioned. He's closer to it than most, but, like, he is in fan mode, and what he says, though, carries more weight than your average burner account that has a Notre Dame logo as the avatar and has the handle of Irish Fan 43. This is Lou Holtz, who's got over 200 career wins and was the head coach for Notre Dame the last time they won the national championship in 1988. So that's why it makes waves. That's why it's got some extra juice to it. That's why it's got some more punch behind it, paired with the history. And so, again, I honestly, the fan in me, I have no dog in the fight here. Like, I just want to see a great game. I think either storyline with either coach winning or side winning is compelling. I just appreciate Lou Holtz being willing to double down on what he said, essentially double down on his, emotional real estate that he keeps with Ohio State via the Twitter sphere. Again, this coming on the heels of Ryan Day saying he and Lou Holtz are, in fact, from what I can gather, not on the best of terms. So this in itself is just hysterical, and Lou Holtz has those credentials. On the Ohio State side, we got to make sure this is clear. Ryan Day's job, if they lose, is absolutely not in question. Like, that doesn't even need to really be discussed. The second part is I don't really know this triggers Ryan Day all that much. Like I said, yeah, the emotions are probably a little bit raw if we're given a short answers on how we feel about Lou Holtz. But I get the sense he's probably got more on his plate, like game planning for Ohio State's offense against Notre Dame defense and things of that nature. But I do think the interesting thing about this is if I'm an Ohio State player, we've seen, man, this Ohio State team has been very close all year, seems to have gotten closer since their shortcomings in the regular season, especially that Michigan game. And I don't think they needed anything extra to get them rolling. And regardless of how tongue-in-cheek this was, just competitors kind of find whatever they need to get rolling. They find whatever they need to kind of light that fire. Like, you hear stories about Michael Jordan bumping into dudes in restaurants, the day before his games, and them saying, "Hey, Michael, good to see you." And he's like, "That was so disrespectful. That was all I needed to get going." Comping, I guess, Ohio State here to Michael Jordan, which is a lofty comparison. But if they needed anything else to get rolling, if they needed anything else to kind of light the fire for this Ohio State team, a coach that's known for what he did at the school you're playing, essentially calling out your current leader in Ryan Day, I wonder if that doesn't make for a little bit extra intensity running out that tunnel on Monday night, as if Ohio State needed that. But, I mean, as a college football fan, this is hysterical. Like, I'm all for this. I'm all for Lou Holtz saying what he wants to say. And I'll also say this, too. Like, if Lou Holtz wants to keep doing this every single time with Ohio State, like, more power to him. You're 88. Say what you want to say, dude. Again, your credentials speak for themselves. You got a national championship to your resume. Lou Holtz can say whatever he wants to say, as far as I'm concerned. And Ohio State, in the same way, can respond as however they want to respond. But regardless, man, post-game now, you wonder, does Ryan Day give us a volume 2 of, I want to know where Lou Holtz is right now? And if he wants to know where Lou Holtz is during that game, per Lou Holtz, he will be in Atlanta, Georgia for that game. I can't wait, man. The storylines write themselves. Glad to have you all dialed in, man. Make sure you are subscribed to the On3 YouTube channel if you haven't already. Again, a smorgasbord, if you will, of content coming your way when we get to Atlanta. The plan is to leave for Atlanta tomorrow, get checked in, get set up, and just attack media days on Fridays. A lot of content coming for you, so make sure you're dialed in, make sure you are subscribed. This show is brought to you by our friends over at PrizePicks. Got a segment for you later in the show. Should be a good time. But if you have yet to follow us or follow our picks, rather, over at prizepicks.com, would recommend doing that. Just a great way for us to max out this last game of the college football season. Use code HARDCOUNT, $5 in lineups, gets us $50 in promo funds. Okay, now I cannot stress this enough. When you use that code, yes, it gets you $50 to play with, and that's a good deal. If you want to support the show, that's another great way to use code HARDCOUNT and to support the show in that fashion, because the folks at PrizePicks, they see that, they appreciate that, and they're like, oh, okay, y'all got some sickos dialed in. Yeah, we do. So shout out to y'all for using that code HARDCOUNT, again, at prizepicks.com. And whether we win or lose on our play, $50 is yours to have and to hold via promo funds over at prizepicks.com. So the world of college football is changing a lot right now. We've had the playoff start this year. The expanded playoff, rather, start this year. We have had the transfer portal continue to evolve. We have had NIL evolve. We have had conference realignment. And so I went to the socials and asked y'all, man, what is going to be some changes that you would bet on seeing in the next 3 years when it comes to the world of college football? And I got a couple of these that I want to get off my chest here and kind of call our shot before we get rolling. The first is the most obvious, and a lot of y'all kind of alluded to this as well, but we're going to see more teams in the playoff. We will. Now, will it be in 2025? I would bet no. Just given the current structure, it sounds like we're pretty locked into this format we have right now, and there's a lot of dollars changing hands, which I guess is what this whole thing is about. But like the problem with this playoff expanding and why we're against the playoff expanding is what I've said many times on this show. Like, there's nobody driving college football. A lot of passengers, a lot of us on this vehicle, just, headed down the highway. Clear down 55 South, whatever highway you're on. And there's nobody actually steering this thing. Everyone's just sort of acting in their own best interest. And so the people that are able to dictate the playoff are TV people, money people, people that wear suits and ties to work every single day. If that's you, more power to you. But the people that make these decisions, it's exactly their day of life. So, with that being said, why would you ever, if you're making these decisions, put less teams into a playoff field that is telling you, hey, give us more of an inventory, we'll give you more money? Okay, yeah, more money, more problems, cool, let's roll with that. So we're against this. I've said this many times. I think the more you expand the playoff, the more you water down what has made college football, which is the regular season. So we're against that. But again, we don't have a commissioner. We have nobody driving this bus. I've seen several people throw their hats in the rings for the commissioner role, and we're not throwing our hat in the ring. We're cool sitting back here talking about it and enjoying the product that it is. But we do think someone needs to take the reins here and oversee this thing. All right, so it's going to expand. I would bet it's 14. I don't think from this past season you can make a case for expanding to more than adding two-ish teams to this whole deal, just especially with how the first round went. And that, to me, is going to be very interesting to see how they move forward from that. Now, within that, I think the conference championships is going to change within the next couple of years. And the reason why I feel this way is there's been too much discussion from too many people of importance, whether it be head coaches, whether it be commissioners. It happens a lot on television. The people that have these 4-letter networks or 3-letter networks that broadcast this thing and have a lot to do with the TV deals. Everyone is so geared towards the college football playoff right now, which, again, we are pro regular season, but given the context of this discussion, this is where we're all looking right now is the college football playoff. Can you make the dance? Can you get yourself in the best position to make a run when you get to the dance? All those things are true. And at this point in time now, with conference championships, is Georgia not better off for not playing in the SEC championship? Now, you won the SEC. Good luck telling everyone in Athens to not play for the SEC title and to take that game off or whatever, because there's a bunch of competitors out there, and I appreciate that from Kirby Smart. But roll with me here for a second. Regardless of what you think about Carson Beck, if he were to play against Notre Dame, I'm not telling you Georgia wins, but do you not have a different level of confidence potentially playing with your quarterback you've played with all year long? I'm just saying, I think that's maybe worth unpacking. So I'm not saying you do away with conference championships, just period. But I do think there is something to be said for that conference championship maybe evolving a little bit. Maybe you have a regular season champ, and then you have a couple of teams play for a play-in spot. Maybe it's the 2 and 3 team playing for a spot in the college football playoff. What I think we all kind of agree is going to happen is as this playoff expands, see evolution number 1 that's coming on this list, there's going to be, I think, the big dogs in the sport, the SEC and the Big Ten, sit down at the bargaining table and say, here's the deal. We want this many spots. Take it or leave it. Maybe it's not as blunt as that, but that's about how I see that discussion going. Now, a lot of y'all are hearing me say these words. You're like, this guy's a freaking SEC bias, Big Ten homer. And I'm like, whoa. Hey, just roll with me here. Regardless of what you think my investment is with these different conferences, whatever you think, I see a lot of the takes out there is like, these conferences writing these guys checks. You're welcome to believe whatever you want to believe. I'm telling you that's not the case. But what I would say is with the Big Ten and the SEC, those are the two conferences with the schools that generate the most revenue. They draw the eyeballs. Like you're going to the concert, they're the one playing the show. And that's not me down on the Big 12. That's not me down on the ACC. That's just the reality. So when you sit down to talk about the college football playoff and the product that it is, the Big Ten and the SEC is saying, hey, listen, we need 3 spots, guaranteed, minimum. We need 4 spots, guaranteed, minimum. When we expand this thing, you make sure that we have a seat at the table because, quite frankly, we're paying for a lot of this party. We're going to pick what the seating chart is. So I'm not telling you that's right. I'm not telling you that I'm for that. But what I am saying is I think that's right around the corner with how this playoff expands and how we ultimately adjust conference title games. Because if I have the SEC or the Big Ten that's saying, hey, we get 4 spots for sure, the regular season champ, the team that went through the gauntlet of whatever that regular season is in the Big Ten or the SEC, they're not playing an extra weekend. If I'm the conference commissioner and I want to have the best chance possible for one of my teams to win the national championship, I'm not having my best team put more strain on their bodies, all right? Just full stop. So I think you could have a play-in situation. That is a very interesting conversation to have in itself of what does the conference title weekend look like. But all in all, there'll be games played on conference title weekend. What will they be? Who knows? But it's going to be interesting to see how that whole thing evolves. Quick footnote, though, on the college football playoff in itself, as we're talking about how it's going to evolve with spots and auto bids and all that. I think the psychology of the committee is going to evolve. One, because we're going to see this whole committee change people in general, because the average term you serve there is 3 years. But I wonder a little bit, I'm not telling you this is my opinion, but I wonder if this happens, if we see games like Penn State SMU happen, and the committee says, again, I have no issue with SMU being in the playoff, but if the committee says, if this is a TV product, and we're trying to act in the best interests of, potentially our pockets, was SMU the best team to have in there? I'm using this purely as an example, so roll with me here. Maybe, just maybe, the psychology evolves to where it's like, hey, actually, wins matter, 100% they matter. But I think how you look in those wins and the path you took to get those wins also matters. Now, notice, I did not say a word about the Big Ten, did not say a word about the SEC. I'm just saying the rigor of your schedule, I wonder if the committee, after seeing some of these first-round games, starts to pivot a little bit with how they evaluate teams when it comes to this 12-team, eventually 14 field. And this wouldn't be like a new thought for the committee, just so we're all aligned here. Like the committee has viewed things in a hypothetical sense before. Ask Florida State. Lose your quarterback. They see what they are without Jordan Travis. They see how they're winning games without him in the game, and they're like, all right, listen, hey, Florida State, we appreciate you and what you've done, but we don't think you're a team that belongs in the 14 playoff. That's an extreme example, and I'm not saying injuries should play all the way into it, but there is something to a little bit of, again, hypotheticals is kind of what college football in a lot of ways has been built on over the course of its history. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying that's a part of the fabric of the sport, and I think it'll factor in when it comes to how they evolve here with selecting teams. Again, not telling you it's SEC and Big Ten, but I am telling you that the committee could very well evolve in how they perceive that. Now, another change is coming, man. The transfer portal calendar, it's already changed. It's still going to change. They've changed the window for the winter portal cycle from 45 days to 30 days. The spring window is 10 days. To me, this is a matter of common sense and just a matter of how quickly can we get the logistics in place to follow the common sense. Everyone is saying the same thing. Hey, listen, this is not sustainable. We're going to lose good people from college football. They already have, whether it be personnel or coaches. We're going to, quite frankly, have trouble if we're in the college football playoff or playing for a conference championship to help ourselves for the next season because we're trying to get prepped for a playoff game, but we're also trying to recruit this stud wide receiver out of the portal. We can't do both to the best of our abilities. This is not a winning situation. And then third, I think it puts the power all the way out of whack, which I think is the most important part of this when it comes to the player to coach or school, rather, back and forth. And hear me clearly, I am pro-player as it gets, man. I'm pro-NIL. I'm pro-players getting paid millions if they're worth that. I'm extremely pro-player. But what I think is tricky about this whole situation with the portal is having 30 days during the winter to decide if you're going to stay or go from a school. You're not taking 30 days to decide. You're having 30 days to provide leverage and to do different things that are, quite frankly, maybe a little bit unsavory in some ways when it comes to your discussions with schools, probably even before the season is over. You don't need 30 days. Like 30 days essentially holds a coach hostage, which I don't think necessarily is the best path forward. Let's shut that down to like 2 weeks, man. You need more than 2 weeks to decide what you're going to do for the next year of your career? I mean, 14 days? I don't think so. That to me feels like a stretch. I think you cut it down. I think you see it cut down pretty significantly. And the reason, again, with the common sense part of this, while we're going to see this happen, is you have so many voices that matter in this sport that are essentially saying, hey, this has to change. Like, I've held this belief for a long time. The life cycle of an idea becoming a reality in the world of college football is as follows. Starts as a good thought, starts as a rumbling, whether it be in-house between staffs or whether it's, kind of finding its way into the media world. And then eventually you have major voices saying it. It was this way with revenue sharing as well. You had Nick Saban saying, yeah, there's a lot of TV money. Players probably should get paid. Jim Harbaugh said that last year at the national championship game during media days. What happened now? We're on the doorstep of revenue sharing. So, again, I think this is sort of in that stage where the most important voices are saying this good idea out loud. Hey, we need to shrink the portal. I think that's going to happen here in the next 3 years. The portal is also brand new, man. It was a reality in 2018. Like in 2018, 6 years? Things evolve in less time than that. I mean, the iPhone, I think, in its first 6 years still had a home button on it, man. Like, we're still in the home button phase of this whole thing when it comes to what the transfer portal is. Last thing that I think is worth discussing, a lot of y'all, in responding to this tweet that I put out saying, hey, what's the changes coming in college football? A lot of y'all said salary cap. And I see where you're coming from. Because what we just alluded to, revenue sharing is going to start in July of 2025. Sounds like there'll be, give or take, $20 million allocated to these different schools, depending on the conference and things of that nature. I think the misconception with salary cap, and the reason why me personally, I'm anti-salary cap, is because there's this idea that it somehow like helps the little guy. Hey, help the Cornells of the world. Again, I'm using my alma mater here just to kind of give us a good gauge for how I feel about this. Help those schools that maybe don't have as much money to begin with, and maybe limit the big boys. Don't let them have 20 million. Like, everybody gets the same amount. We'll go from there, and that'll make sure it's the most fair sport possible. One, that's never how college football has worked. I mean, it's always been a matter of resources and being able to recruit with those resources, whether it's actual dollars and cents or it's facilities. That's the first part. The other part of this is you're actually hamstringing the little guy. Like, if I'm Cornell and I have the same amount of money as an Ohio State, there is very few worlds where a recruit is going to pick Cornell over Ohio State. Full stop. That's the reality. Why? Because the development, the history, NFL track record, the coaching staff, all those things. And I love my alma mater, but like, that's the reality, man. So what you could do, actually, I think, without the salary cap, if I'm Cornell, I say, let's get $100 million together. Again, I'm using a wild number here because I think it illustrates the point well. Let's get $100 million together. Let's go buy the best roster money can buy, and then we're going to compete with the big boys. Then we can go beat the Ohio States, the Alabamas, the whoever's. Giving them the same money doesn't change the playing field. It just means the big boys stay the big boys, just so we're all aligned there. So I understand the salary cap thought. I think it's a fair thought to have, but I don't think it actually accomplishes what we're hoping it would accomplish if we're rooting for the salary cap. So those are the changes we see coming in college football. Again, I think a lot of those are happening. All of those are happening, I think, in the next 3 years. And curious to hear from y'all in the comment section and on my socials at JD PicKell. We'll keep a good thing going, man. We have, over the course of the last, couple of weeks, as the season's wrapped up for most teams, done a series called Exit Meetings. Now, if you've been tuned in this week, you know what I'm talking about. Quick rundown. Take a look at what you did this year. Take a look at what you're doing next year. It's not an actual exit meeting to where a coach is being fired, but it's an exit meeting into the next season, which every player has as they finish up what the previous year was. So I think it's appropriate for us right now to take a look at what the vibe is in Norman, Oklahoma. And the tough part about the world we're in right now in the college football 2025 era is we don't do well with nuance. We like to have things defined. We like to have things black and white. There's no gray area. There's no explanation. It's either it's definitely this way or it's definitely that way. Some of that's social media. Some of that's media in general. Some of that's just us being stubborn as human beings. But like we really like to have things neat and nice and tidy and completely defined for us. When you try to define Oklahoma, you look at the record and say, okay, they won 6 football games. They lost to Navy in the bowl game. Beat Alabama. That's nice. But Brent Venables now, man, it's 2, 6, and 7 seasons in 3 years at a place like Oklahoma. That's not good enough. Oklahoma must not be able to cut it in the SEC. Brent Venables must be a bad coach. That's without nuance. Now, what nuance would say is us on this show, we always kind of felt like this was going to be a tricky year for the folks out in Norman. Didn't think it was a situation where you couldn't win. Like if Jackson Arnold translates to being a 5-star kind of guy year one and your receivers stay healthy, you got a chance here. But like before the year, we had Oklahoma at 6-6 and heard from the good folks in Norman about it very, very loudly. I understand why. But in college football, in addition with us being in love with definitions of teams, we also fall in love with logos and previous year's records, right? What is the Oklahoma logo? To us in the college football public, success, typically Big 12 championships. And then what were they the year before under Brent Venables? Hey, they jumped from 6 wins to 10 wins. That's a 4-win improvement. They must be going the right direction. They are on the upswing. But again, what does nuance tell us? Nuance tells us they are jumping into the most difficult, up there with the Big Ten, conference in college football as they transition into the SEC. They're breaking in a brand new offensive line in that conference. They're breaking in a brand new quarterback, a brand new offensive coordinator, and oh, by the way, they have 44% production back on offense from the year before. That's 111 out of 134 teams. That doesn't sound like a recipe for immediate success to me. Sounds like a very, very tough uphill battle. Sounds like you're swimming in a swimming pool with a sweatsuit on, man. Like you're fighting for your life in that thing. Again, not saying you couldn't have had success, but I am saying all that put together, plus the injuries, it's like, man, that's not necessarily going to be the easiest road to walk down. And so you saw the line in Vegas preseason with the over-under win total was 7.5. And people scoffed at that. And again, optically it looked weird because the logo, because what Oklahoma was the year before. But when you looked at the schedule, you're like, yeah, this kind of makes sense. And they finished what they finished, but it is what it is in some ways because of all the things they had working against them going into the season. So I talk about the roster and breaking in the new offensive line and all those things, and I think the fair pushback to have is, well, if the roster wasn't in a place to be successful, isn't that on the head coach? Isn't that on Brent Venables? Yeah, to an extent it is. It wasn't necessarily, though, like Oklahoma just sat on their heels and said, you know what, we like who we have in-house. Ignorance is bliss. Let's roll with these guys. Like Oklahoma went to the portal now and got some dudes. Deion Burks being one of them. If he could stay healthy all year long, I mean, that was probably, in my estimation, the best offensive weapon for Oklahoma from Purdue. You brought in 5 different offensive linemen from the portal. Oklahoma last year allowed a sack rate of 12.5%. Good for 132nd in college football. So what was the issue here? Did Oklahoma just swing and miss on the offensive line? They obviously didn't have a ton of success on the offensive line with what they added via the portal. Also, they were dinged up. But the other part of this is like Oklahoma, with what they needed on the offensive line, losing guys via the portal and the draft and graduation, it was the equivalent of having to go shopping during a natural disaster for groceries. Like, it doesn't matter what you need. You go to the grocery store, it's probably not there for you. You got to go find 5 offensive linemen to replace what you lost from the year before. You got to replace the whole offensive line in a natural disaster that is the SEC. It's probably not going to be the best recipe for success. Now, you might be able to scrounge around and find a couple of cartons of eggs. Maybe you find some milk that's not expired, but like it's not a winning game. And so what we said repeatedly on this show was context is key with Oklahoma. If Jackson Arnold hits and the skill players can elevate, there's a lot of ifs there, then maybe Oklahoma can have some success. Now, it's worth noting, too, the year before, for everyone in the comment section saying, guys, a Sooner hater, whatever, we had Oklahoma at 10-2, and they went 10-2. So call it what you want. So back to the whole thought around the roster, call it an excuse, call it nuance. My take is it's not fair yet to define who Brent Venables is as a head coach. The first year is the first year, and they very clearly had to start from scratch in a lot of ways after they lost Caleb Williams and a lot of other pieces via the portal. And the second year, they made a massive jump, won 10 games. This is not an opinion, but I just want you to do this exercise for yourself. What would Oklahoma have done last year in the Big 12? There's a silence there for you to fill in your own blank. What would their record have been in the Big 12? I don't know if it would have been 6 games when it comes to their win total. I'll leave it at that. I love looking forward here to what Oklahoma has done this offseason. A lot of portal additions. We'll see how they translate. But to me, the biggest thing that Oklahoma did was they're like, hey, we got to fix the offensive side of the football. Because as bad as last year was, defense was solid. Defense allowed 22 points per game. The problem was the offense only scored 21. So if you're looking at this thing glass half full style, Oklahoma really just has one side of the football to fix. Like you went to the SEC, and yeah, you got to recoup your personnel and defense, but defense didn't struggle. The offense struggled. And so they go out and get, at the time, the number 1 player in the portal in Washington State quarterback John Mateer, who obviously reunites with his former offensive coordinator Ben Arbuckle, former quarterbacks coach John Kuzieski, who's on staff in Norman as well right now. And I love what this means for a number of reasons. You can go watch the John Mateer breakdown that we have on this channel if you want to get a more in-depth analysis of this. But it comes down to 2 things for me with John Mateer and what he brings to Norman. Both things they need. First, he changes the temperature internally, from what I can gather. Now, again, I've never met John Mateer. I've never shook his hand and looked him in the eye. But from what I can tell as a spectator, dude's got some juice, some moxie, some confidence, some swagger. Sounds like another quarterback that was there at one point in time. War number 6. Can't remember his name. Anyway, that would change the temperature for Oklahoma in the sense of when your most important player, the guy who touches the football every single snap, has that kind of swag to him. What did we see when Baker was there? It kind of permeated throughout that offense, permeated throughout that team. And that team was super talented too when Baker was there as well. Don't get it twisted. But I do think there's something to be said coming off of a year that was an underachievement by all standards and then inserting someone there with a ton of confidence and juice and moxie and swagger to kind of almost revamp that not culture, that's the wrong word, but revamp the vibe a little bit in Norman. Get that pep back in their step. If that quarterback's not worried about anything, we're not worried about anything. We go as our quarterback goes, go as the leadership goes. Persona, leadership, usually the same thing. The other thing that John Mateer brings to the table, the point number 2 I want to make here, is he is a wideout for the offense with what he is from a mobility perspective. I mentioned 12.5% of the time of the offensive snaps for Oklahoma, they were getting sacked. It's tough to start the car when the keys won't turn, man. Just it is what it is. I mean, we can excuse everything all day long, but if the offensive line has problems, it's tough to get it going, especially when you don't have someone back there who is able to be mobile enough and throw the football well enough to get you out of situations. You kind of had a combo of the two between Jackson Arnold and Michael Hawkins Jr. Michael Hawkins Jr., great athlete, but just was too early on, I believe, in his development to be able to give Oklahoma the best chance needed to win football games. And I don't think that's being harsh on the guy. I think he's got a bright future, but just kind of the way it works, especially in the SEC. And Jackson Arnold, mobile, but not mobile enough to escape everything they had coming their way up front. So back to Mateer. The offensive line you would hope is improved, but what if Mateer just cuts that sack rate in half? What if it's not a phenomenal year from the offensive line next year in Norman, but what if it's just improved to 6%? Does Oklahoma win more football games? I don't know. They have a better chance to. I'll say that right now. And I've said this before, so I'll double down, I guess, on what I just said. I said I don't know if Oklahoma wins more games. I think John Mateer in himself is probably worth 2, maybe 3 wins. I think he's that good. And so a lot of it comes down to how much you add around him. A lot of it comes down to the way that you play defensively next year as well. But I think you have what you need at quarterback. I really do. His best plays may be broken plays. Scrambling out, scrambling right, eyes downfield, find someone open. Wasn't how we called it, but John Mateer won what we would call the second play of that football play. And having that, and an experienced cat in John Mateer with how much ball he's played, I think that matters, and I think that's going to matter for them here going forward. So you talk about Brent Venables, and you talk about what he is as a head coach. I just don't think we know yet. It'd be different if we had a bunch of different data points on Brent Venables as a head coach. It's his 3rd year doing it, period. Really good DC. I trust him with the defense. I mean, I think it's very fair to trust a guy who's been a defensive coordinator for a long time to have a good defense as a head coach. But I don't think it's fair to just define his entire coaching career in Norman based on a tough year in the SEC and then his first year ever being a head coach. Because in between those, you got a 10-win season where they made massive strides. So the vibe in Norman, I understand there's a lot of desire to define them right away and to define Brent Venables, but the nuance, as always, is absolutely critical to what they're going to be in 2025. And spoiler, I think they're going to be much improved. All right. Now, it's funny we did this on purpose. Oklahoma and USC, you can say there's no rivalry there, but I know there's no love lost with the whole Lincoln Riley exit to Norman. I know there's no love lost with the way those two, I think, perceive each other, and that's fine. That's another segment for another time that we've actually done on the show. But let's keep the exit meetings rolling here. Let's have a conversation around USC, what they were this past year, and what they're going to be going forward. I think how you view the 2024 season, if you're a Trojan fan, is really all about how positive you want to be, right? Kind of true in life as well. Last year, you could say there's a lot of positives to take away. Say, okay, I mean, hey, we were in every game, had a lead in every game in the fourth quarter except one, and that one game was against a team that's now playing for a national title on Monday in Notre Dame. You could say, well, hey, we showed a lot of grit in that bowl game, and we came back from a deficit against Texas A&M. Jacoby Lane showed a lot of promise. Maiyava looks good. Hey, we passed him the keys, and he showed what he could be here in the future. Also, the defense, man. Defense was the exhausted talking point all offseason long heading into this year. Can they be better on defense with Danton Lynn? They can. They have. They were a full touchdown better. And it wasn't just the numbers. It was like you watch how they play ball, and there's a very visible lifestyle change with how they do things. I've made this comp before, but I'll make it again. USC previously kind of had like a resolution style of approaching defense, New Year's resolution. Hey, we want to be better on defense. Write it down, put it on a sticky note, put it on your dashboard, and look at it every day. Well, what happens? Sticky note falls off. Other things become more important. You don't make real lifestyle changes. USC is committed to making lifestyle changes. It's not a resolution. It's not a diet, not a trend. It is who they are now under D'Anton Lynn. And I think if you're a USC fan, like, you should have confidence in that side of the football. How wild is that to say a year removed from what they were a year ago? I digress. Now, you can look at the positives. You can also look at what the results were, which I think if you're doing that, I don't blame you. Like going 7-5 at USC in the regular season, I know it was the Big Ten. I get that. But, like, that's not acceptable. That's not what that logo is about, not what that place is about. You got to be better. Have got to be better, especially whether it's fair or not, given the success of Lincoln Riley's first year with them making a New Year's Six Bowl game and Caleb Williams and that whole ride that was. Like, I don't think that's an irresponsible way to look at it either. What I would say is for USC in 2025, we're always told, like, hey, you can be whatever you want when you grow up. Someone tells you that when you're young and you believe it for a while, and then you sort of, have more life experience, as morbid as it sounds, and you start to tell yourself reasons why you can't have success. Oh, well, is that really realistic to do YouTube for a living? Is that really realistic for me to think that I can go, be an X, Y, and Z job? You tell yourself what you can and can't be. For USC, it's hard for me to say they have any massive limitations in 2025. Like, you have questions? Sure, everyone does. It's January. But look at what they are. Like, Jaden Maiava, again, showed some promise. Showed some promise in that bowl game. Yeah, there's some bad to work through. There's some good, and you got a quarterback whisperer in Lincoln Riley, which I think it's fair to still give him the benefit of the doubt, with all he's done as a QB guru. Lost some guys to the portal, especially at the wide receiver position. You ask USC fans, though, they're not all that worried about it. Now, hear me clearly. I'm not trying to downplay the losses that you had. I think they were good players. I think Zachariah Branch and Deuce Robinson will both have success post-USC. But I also don't have any pushback to the USC faithful saying, hey, listen, man, we like our guys. Jacoby Lane, yeah, we're good. Mekhi Lemon, dog. I'm not pushing back on that. I think you have what you need at the skill player position. The defense, again, made legit lifestyle changes. They're at a different operating level right now. Say what you want about Lincoln Riley as a head coach and what it's been in Los Angeles the past 3 years, but, like, still one of the best play callers in the sport offensively. Oh, by the way, now, NIL, it sounds like, is fully operational in Los Angeles under USC. And also there's fertile recruiting ground in the Southern California area. Like in Trinity League, I'm biased, absolutely, because I played in that league, but I think it's the best high school league in all America. I mean, St. John Bosco, Mater Dei, Orange Lutheran, JC, there's a lot of talent in that league alone, in addition to the surrounding areas of LA and San Diego, to be able to go keep top talent home and recruit at a high level. So you're saying, JD, there's no limitations, then, like, what does it come down to? You're telling me we can do all these things. Like, okay, tell me what has to happen. It comes down to, for me, with Lincoln Riley, how pliable is he willing to be moving forward at USC? And some of this is things that only people know within the building in Los Angeles, so I don't want to speak to specifically to any given area of this team. But what I will say is every great coach in the sport, it's non-negotiable, is willing to adapt. Now, Lincoln Riley, whether his arm was twisted or whether he did it on his own, has adapted on the defense side of the football. Can you keep adapting? Now, what does that look like? I don't know. Again, I'm not in the building. But like Nick Saban had to do it on offense. Bringing in guys like Kiffin and Sark. Kirby had to do it with personnel. Had to get faster instead of bigger. Ryan Day, this past year, had to pass off play calling. That's Ryan Day's baby, man. That's what he cut his teeth doing. He had to pass off play calling to his former coach and Chip Kelly, and they're in the national championship game. And then Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame, I know that's going to make USC people cringe, but, like, he has made a living as a head coach at Notre Dame off of being willing to adapt, challenging everything, being pliable, and being in a spot now where they can go win the whole darn thing in 4 quarters on Monday night. So is there that willingness to self-scout, adapt, and admit where you have shortcomings, admit where you have blind spots? Because that, transparently, is the pushback that I hear from folks close to USC is, hey, Lincoln Riley, good human being, good coach, wants to do it his way. And if you want to do it your way, I have no issue against that. But understand now, you're limiting the input around you that could have some success here for your football team going forward. Like the thing that I heard was Lincoln Riley wants to run his operation like a Big 12 school, but he's in the Big 10. I'm not telling you that's true or untrue. I'm just telling you, again, the sentiment that Lincoln Riley does not want to surrender, more control or what have you. If that's the case, that's going to hamstring USC. If it's not the case and he's willing to adapt and change, then USC could go be in the college football playoff this time next year. I don't think that's irresponsible. The second thing, though, that has to happen with Lincoln Riley to have success at USC and for them to achieve all their wildest hopes and dreams, he has to truly understand and embrace what the USC job is. Now, if he's already doing that and it's taking some time for it to show its fruit, great. We'll see that here shortly. But I've said this a couple times about different jobs. We did a segment about this with Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman. We've talked about this with Texas A&M. I think it's true for schools like Florida and Alabama. There are certain schools, certain jobs as a head coach that you truly have to understand the job that you're at, and you have to double down and embrace the job that you're at. And you've seen guys that have had success at USC have done this to a level 11 out of 10. Like Pete Carroll is the best example. Embraced LA, embraced the tradition at USC, embraced that logo, embraced everything that came with USC. And they had success. Sure, it's a different time with the portal and NIL. Doesn't mean you can't still embrace it and have massive success. Doesn't mean that same tactic for success wouldn't still translate, because I think it would. Ed Orgeron, I get it, man. He had a very short stint as the interim head coach at USC. There was a lot of folks in LA now that were rooting for and still believe he should have been the head coach after his interim stint was up in that season. Why? Because he got USC. He understood what it took. He understood everything about that place that made it USC. And that sounds like I'm just sort of giving you a vague, ambiguous take on this thing. It's the reality at a place like that, man. It is. And taking a step further on the Ed Orgeron thing, yeah, he won a national championship. Is Ed Orgeron a better head coach than Lincoln Riley? Is he? And if he is the gap so wide to where Lincoln Riley can't have massive success at USC? Food for thought. So in 2025, no Ohio State on the schedule, no Penn State, no Indiana. You do play Oregon, you do play Michigan, you do play Nebraska, Iowa, still playing Notre Dame. So it's not an easy path by any way, but it's not unworkable, especially with everything that I just told you USC has in-house. To me, it's all about USC. What do you want to be in 2025, and how willing are you to adapt, be pliable, change to get to where you want to go when it comes to Lincoln Riley calling the shots? I would love to see USC do well. Full transparency, just so y'all know. I mean, I grew up around USC in Orange County. I mean, that was the school, man, that a lot of folks talked about as being, potentially getting back to being a power in the sport that it is. And it has been before. It's not right now. And I don't think there's any reason structurally why USC can't be a power in college football on the West Coast. So I digress, but those are our thoughts on USC and Oklahoma alike. But let's move on to this, man. Talking some national championship. I've stressed this many times, but we're going to be at the national championship. We're going to be there all weekend. We're going to be in Atlanta talking ball and talking to some of these individuals making up this national title game. Let's take a look at the most important position in this game, though. I mean, you could argue for the secondary versus the receivers of Ohio State between that battle with the Irish defense and the Buckeye firepower. Could argue about the trenches, and those are all fair takes. But there's no way to slice it that the quarterback matchup in this spot doesn't factor in a massive way to whoever hosts that national title trophy on Monday night. There's no way around it. So we'll break this down right now, but first, make sure you are subscribed to the On3 YouTube channel. Again, ton of content coming your way. We'll be in Atlanta all weekend through Monday, having a good time. Make sure you're locked in. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss anything. Hoping to talk to both these guys, full transparency. In addition to that, this show brought to you by our friends over at PrizePicks. All right, code HARDCOUNT, $5 in lineups, gets you $50 in promo funds. Right now, there's a Will Howard free square. He throws for more than half a yard. It hits. So go ahead and use that code HARDCOUNT, $5 in lineups, $50 in promo funds. So what do you need from both these quarterbacks? Like, what's the role for these guys in this spot? We're going to break it down for Riley Leonard as well as Will Howard. But let's start with Riley Leonard. It feels like to me it is the third verse of the same song we've been singing all playoff. Like, hey, Riley, we need you, brother. we need you to find a way. And to this point, man, he has answered the bell. I understand the Penn State game and threw those 2 picks, and it is what it is, but dude is a warrior. And there's a quote from Vince Lombardi that I think we need to read just to give you a proper context around what is required of the Irish quarterback in this spot. Quote, "I firmly believe that any man's finest hour, the greatest fulfillment of all that he holds dear, is that moment when he has worked his heart out in a good cause and lies exhausted on the field of battle victorious." Now, is that dramatic? 110%. Is it true? Without a doubt. Like, we talk about the talent gap between Ohio State and Notre Dame, 10 5-stars for Ohio State, none for Notre Dame, tells the story pretty clearly. Riley Leonard was a 3-star out of high school, transferred from a basketball school at Duke. Like, this is your moment, bro. This is your spot to go lay it all on the line for your school you just transferred to, make a case nationally for what you have been as a player this entire season, and make a case for the NFL draft. Like, this is your spot, man. There is no greater opportunity than what you have in front of you. And so that's a lot of pomp and circumstance to tell you I think it is by any means necessary for him on Monday night. Like, I think it's going to be a lot of quarterback design run, which we'll talk about more here in a second. I think for him, it is going to be, there's no reason to leave anything in the tank. Like, sometimes you see teams, wisely so, try and limit how much they'd run their quarterback because they don't want to get him hurt. Riley Leonard, you're hoping you don't get hurt, obviously, but there's no next game to be healthy for, man. You give it all on 4th and 1, 3rd and 7, like he has all playoff with him jumping over dudes against Georgia in that playoff game is why we refer to 3rd and 7. So for him, man, it takes what it takes. Like, the result of winning this national championship game, it might be ugly, it might be clunky, it might be 80 yards on the ground again and 90 yards passing, but like for him, it's by any means necessary. You don't save anything, you don't hold anything back, you get after it, you swing your sword, and you make sure that you leave that place exhausted, regardless of the result. Kind of cliche, but I think it's 110% true, because I don't think they have a spot now where Riley Leonard is somehow like carried by other parts of this Notre Dame offense. It's going to go through him. Make no mistake, it's going to go through him. Going to go through his legs. They're going to ask him to push the ball downfield, especially with how good this Ohio State offense is to keep score. They're going to ask a lot of him. So what do you need from Riley Leonard? Put it simply, everything. Everything in this national championship game. Now, we gave a quote for Riley Leonard. Let's give another quote, or a story rather, for what you need from Will Howard in this national title spot. So there's a phenomenal documentary series called America's Game. I don't know if they still do it, but it used to be this documentary series around Super Bowl champion teams. And they chronicled Tom Brady's, I believe it was his first Super Bowl that he won in New England. And they tell the story where, it's New England has got the football and they got a chance to go down and drive, kick a field goal to win the Super Bowl. And they make a decision on the sideline, hey, you know what? Instead of, taking a knee or playing for overtime or just being conservative, whatever, we're going to go pedal to the metal here. We're going to go for it. And so everyone on the sideline is telling young Tom Brady, hey, man, don't turn the ball over. Hey, just be safe, be smart, do not turn the football over. Belichick says it, the OC says it. And then Drew Bledsoe, of all people, Tom Brady's now backup, shouts to him, man, forget all that. Go sling it. He used some different verbiage, but we're going to use that because that's the kind of show we try to operate here. He says, man, forget that. Go sling it. I think that's Will Howard in this game, because all year long, all week long now, you're going to hear, hey, can Will Howard just not mess it up? Hey, can he just not crash the Ferrari that is this Ohio State offense? Can he just do enough? Can he keep it within the lines? And that's a fair take to have, but like in this spot now, you don't check your feet at the door, man. You don't check your swing and try, find the right pitch you like. You go in, screaming like a banshee, running there with a spear, and you go and take what you believe is yours. And credit Will Howard, man. He's been doubted a lot even going into this spot, this entire playoff, quite frankly. He is good enough to win you a national championship. Now, the floor is there, too. We could also see what we saw against Michigan, where he has a tough day at the office, and Ohio State suffers because of it, and Notre Dame finds a way to win. But I don't think the fear of what could happen should hold either of these quarterbacks back, but should definitely not hold Will Howard back. I think in a lot of ways, with how good this Notre Dame defense is, you're going to ask Will Howard to be the difference for you, much like he did against Texas. Texas did a phenomenal job limiting Jeremiah Smith to 3 yards. Ohio State didn't really commit to running the football, but they didn't, in the box score at least, have a tremendous day pounding the rock. Like, it took Will Howard running that show the way that he did for them to win the football game. So hear me loud and clear. Will Howard does not need to have the game manager spot. I think he needs to go out there and get after him. So the squares that I like in this game, we got Riley Leonard. I mentioned it's going to take everything from him. He had 18 rush attempts against Penn State. Give me 14 14 in this spot is his number. I'll take more than that. Give me 15, 16. I think it's going to take more. I think they'll call a lot for him on the 3rd and 4th and short, and I expect Notre Dame to be very aggressive in this game. Speaking of aggression, the Will Howard square that I like, 261.5 rush and pass yards combined. I'll take the more there. All right, we're going to open it up a little bit. We're going to rev the engine, and I don't think this is a spot where you just kind of, tippy-toe your way through this game and, Will Howard, give him a couple of shots downfield and that's it. No, like you cut it loose here. You cut it loose, you rev the engine, and you let Will Howard keep that music playing and keep dancing because that's the one that brung you. Shout out DKR. So to get some more takes on this game, on this quarterback matchup, let's bring in a dude now that was a multiple-time all Sun Belt level safety. A dude who was a top 5 trivia finisher as of the last 12 hours. That is the man, the myth, the legend, producer of the Hard Count, vibe curator, Caden Smith.
JD PicKell, how you doing, my guy?
Dude, I'm doing great, man. What are you thinking about this one with the quarterbacks, man? There's a lot here, both different styles, different situations. You got anything for us on these guys, man? Any takes here, any squares you like, or just how you see this playing out with the quarterbacks and their roles in this spot?
Yeah, first of all, I just want to give you a shout out. That was a flawless analysis of both of these quarterbacks.
Hey,
I
think appreciate that.
They're going to be a very interesting part for both of these teams. I think you did a good job talking about the duality of both of these quarterback situations. No one's doubting the weapons that are surrounding a guy like Will Howard or the defense that's going to be able to support him. On the flip side, you have a Riley Leonard who people are coming into this week saying he's going to have to play the game of his career maybe for Notre Dame to pull off the upset win here. I think for both of these guys, though, what they have in common is the use of their legs, and I think that's going to be a very interesting part of this game, and I think that's going to be the X factor for both teams. I think we can both agree if Notre Dame can stay in swinging distance the same way they did against the Penn State, they'll have a shot in this game, and I think an X factor that can really help them out is if we see Riley Leonard being able to use his legs to maximum ability, be able to move the chains, help them possess the clock, do whatever they can to keep things going. I think he's going to run the ball a lot. I like his rush yards total, like you mentioned, at 36.5. I think he could go over that. The sacks make it a little bit confusing, but what I like even more is I think he's going to run the ball a lot. The yardage might be up and down. His longest rush is at 15.5. I'm going to take the under there just because I think Ohio State's defense, we talk about their second level, they're going to be downhill. You have Caleb Downs roaming around. You're going to have that pass rush there. I think he's going to have maybe a successful day running the ball. The total might be more in the up there, but the longest rush, I don't think he gets to 15.5. That's a little long for me. So from a Prize Picks perspective, I like that. And I'm a Green Goblin guy, JD. You look at the Green Goblins for this game particularly, half an interception, Green Goblin for Riley Leonard. He's been throwing it around a little bit more. It's a kind of game, too. I think you could look at that. You could look at the pass attempts at 27.5. I think I'll take the over there, too. I'm a guy who thinks Ohio State could dominate in this game. In that situation, he might have to throw the ball a little bit more. The pass attempts might be up. And then pairing that with an interception, which he's done even in games that he isn't behind in. He's been known to throw an interception every now and then. He's thrown 3 in the postseason, I believe, at this point. From a Riley Leonard perspective, I think those are the squares I like the most. And I think I agree with you. You're going to have to ask a lot from him, and I don't doubt he's going to be leaving it all out there when it comes to this game on Monday.
I'm really curious to see if we get to the fourth quarter, let's say it's a 3-point game. I was really impressed by the way Ohio State responded and they, very clearly went for the jugular against Texas and how they, were able to get that play in the red zone and all that and the Jack Sawyer poetic strip score, whatever. But I do wonder a little bit with how find-a-way-ish this Notre Dame team is and how find-a-way-ish Riley Leonard has been all year long outside of the NIU game. I wonder a little bit if, as this progresses, you see Ohio State maybe get a little bit tight. Maybe Lou Holtz starts tripping a little bit from the box or the side. Maybe things now get a little bit more towards Notre Dame. In a close game, I think I would favor Ohio State still from the way that they played against Texas, but I don't know that I feel amazing about giving Notre Dame a chance in the fourth quarter. If I'm Notre Dame, get us to the fourth quarter within 3 points, and let's play ball from there.
Yeah, I think if you ask Notre Dame faithful, their own team, even if you could be within a field goal going to a fourth quarter of this game, you'll definitely take it in a heartbeat. And I think when you talk about those traits, the intangibles we've been preaching about with Notre Dame and how Marcus Freeman's really flipped the culture, I think talked about the margins as well yesterday. Those are the little things that this team has been able to do that's translated to them being able to rattle off wins in the playoff. You talk about their efficiency, controlling the ball. You talk about on defense, being able to play bend, don't break. You talk about special teams being able to make plays, being disciplined. I think with all of that considered, going back to the Prize Picks perspective of this with a Will Howard, I think there's a reason why Prize Picks is giving away that half a yard, because I think in all scenarios when you're talking about Will Howard in this game, I do like his yardage. If you want to just pair that half a yard with his normal rushing versus and passing, like you mentioned, 26 or 261.5, I would take the over there. His pass yards just in general, 245.5. He's been hitting all those totals. But you talk about Notre Dame, they've been bend, don't break. I like maybe a Will Howard to get a lot of yardage, but maybe not reach the end zone as much. I'd be a lot more bullish on those squares when you just talk about total yardage versus maybe not reaching the end zone as much. I mean, that Travion Henderson touchdown on that screen pass was the only touchdown that he had throughout the day through the air and on the ground. And they were still pretty dominant in that game as far as their offense and what they were able to do. So when you're talking about Will Howard in this game and yet Notre Dame kind of psyche and what they're able to do, I think they're going to put up a tough fight. I think it's going to be bend, don't break. I think they could blow open the game, but overall, in general, I think Will Howard yardage is going to be something you could definitely count on in this matchup.
It's going to be so fun. I cannot wait to get out there. It's going to be, I mean, it's a home game for you, brother. Like, it's going to be a good time out there. I cannot wait. Again, code HARDCOUNT, $5 in lineups, $50 in promo funds when you use that code HARDCOUNT. So appreciate y'all rocking with us. And fade or follow, more power to you, but regardless, get your 50 in promo using that code. So that's the game. We'll talk about our final thoughts here in a matter of moments. But, Cato, it's a Thursday, baby. And on Thursdays, we talk hard count headlines, man. What you got cooked up for us?
We have a lot of headlines here, JD. It's no secret the elephant in the room right now is this is a long show, so this is for the sickos right here. If the sickos want to stick around for the headlines, if the sickos want to stick around for some final thoughts heading to the national championship, you're in the right place. Make sure you like and subscribe. But when you're talking about headlines, the headliner of college football right now, and kind of the NFL too, seems to be Deion Sanders. This dude's been in the news all week about the saga between him staying, coming back to Colorado, or going to the NFL level. It all started last Saturday. Deion Sanders has very strong interest, according to the Las Vegas Raiders Review-Journal, in being the head coach there for that Raiders team. That was followed by a report by Andrew Schultz on Monday revealing that Jerry Jones has spoken to Deion about the Dallas Cowboys head coaching vacancy. Then that was followed with Adam Schefter reporting that same day with a quote from Coach Prime saying, after you hang up on that conversation with Jerry Jones, you process it, you think about it, it's intriguing, but I love Boulder. That was when you saw the On3 graphic that had Boulder under it. That's kind of saying, hey, Deion Sanders was talking to Jerry Jones, not shying away from that fact, but he will be returning to Boulder. Then moments before the show, of course, Ed Warder reports that Deion would almost certainly take the Dallas Cowboys head coaching job if Jerry Jones offers. The quote there is, those around him are encouraging him to pursue it, and Jones is enamored with the idea. JD, what is your reaction from just this back and forth between Deion going to the NFL, staying, going, everything that's just come with it this week?
Well, I think the report we got before the show should hold some extra weight because, like, Ed Werder, if he's talking about that, like, that's the Cowboys. He's the Cowboys' Woj, essentially. I don't think that's, like, super far of a stretch to make when it comes to that kind of news. I keep going back to the idea of, I believe he said this publicly, like, he will not go to the NFL unless he has the opportunity to coach both of his sons. And so preseason, I was pretty quietly on the train of, like, hey, I think this might be the last year. Because if you're Deion Sanders, it doesn't make a ton of sense. Again, I'm not telling you I know what he's wanting to do, but it doesn't make a ton of sense having coached your sons your entirety of, or their entirety rather, of their careers, high school all the way up through college. And then you say, you know what, actually, as you go to the pros and play big-time football on Sundays, I'm not going to be there in person able to watch. Like, even if he didn't end up being a coach in the NFL, I thought there was a chance that maybe he pivots out. But my mind changed as soon as the Julian Lewis stuff became a reality. Obviously, a high-profile quarterback commit already enrolled in Boulder and going through winter conditioning and be there for spring practice. That, to me, felt like, okay, if Julian Lewis is flipping from USC, decommits ultimately ends up at Colorado, like, there must be some very real conversations happening behind closed doors. I don't think Julian Lewis goes to Colorado unless he has the assurance of all assurances that, like, Deion Sanders will be there while he's there. So even if it's not this year, I could definitely see him making a pivot at some point. But going back to his sons, like, Kato, you know the NFL draft world way more in depth than I do. I don't think the Cowboys are going to, unless you think they're going to trade up and draft a Shedeur or something of that nature. Like, it doesn't sound like the Cowboys would be the spot where they're going to land both Shedeur and Shiloh Sanders in the same draft. That feels like a bit of a stretch.
Yeah, that's definitely a stretch. And I think if Deion does end up going to the NFL, there's definitely going to be a lot of quotes and a lot of indicators that would kind of go against what he said as far as staying at Colorado, wanting to build something here. You mentioned Julian Lewis. You're bringing a Caden Salter, too. They're clearly trying to build something beyond what he had there with the 2-star players that are going to be probably 2 of the top 5 picks heading into this draft this year. And I think the Cowboys just made Dak Prescott, the highest or second highest paid quarterback in the NFL. They're not about to trade and try to do anything to get a Shedeur Sanders. And I think that's where the situation would just go completely off the deep end. I think Deion Sanders is the perfect head coach for the college level. I think college football almost needs him a little bit in this point, just from the way he's been delivering off the field. On the field, he delivered this year, obviously, and just the gravitational force he has as far as having that impact on young men and wanting to build them up and make them better. I think that's something that just plays a little bit more at the college level compared to the NFL level, where these guys are making millions. They might look up to Deion, but this is a guy who doesn't have necessarily the offensive or defensive acumen. He's never been a coordinator. So I think just looking at the NFL level, not the best fit for Deion. I think he fits a lot more in a Colorado where he can build over there. And I think if it's a situation where he does go to Dallas and all of a sudden you bring Shedeur into the fold too, I think that just gets absolutely messy and doesn't work. As a New York Giants fan, personally, I'd be a fan of it because I don't think it'd be the best idea for the Dallas Cowboys. And that's kind of where you see a lot of these decisions in the NFL. If you're opposing teams within a division are rooting for the front office moves. There's the videos going around of the Philadelphia Eagles fans clapping it up for Jerry, telling him to keep up the good work. This would be another move that I think a lot of people in that division would support. But I support Deion Sanders staying at the college level and hoping he does it.
I hope so, too. As a college football guy, I just hope he stays in the sport because he's been awesome for the sport. I also think it's fair to say I don't think Deion Sanders is, trying to be deceptive at all, where he's having these conversations in the back room about the Cowboys, but also on the front line saying, no, I'm staying in Boulder. I think all the information we get from Deion Sanders specifically, I think he is being extremely forthright in his desire to stay in Boulder. So it kind of smells like a Jerry Jones campaign of sorts. I wouldn't be surprised if there was somebody else being targeted very heavily behind closed doors in Dallas for that job, but I digress. It'll be a story we'll cover here as it progresses. But again, you and I are on the same page. I'd be surprised if he made the jump to the NFL, at least this season. Wouldn't make sense to me. What else we got, Cato?
Yeah, it's funny. I just want to last thing. You talked about the deception there. I think Deion's just kind of a deceptive guy with his language. Ed Waters reports that he would almost certainly take the Dallas Cowboys. What does that even almost certainly? Almost, but certainly. It's going to be an interesting situation.
Definitely,
regardless.
probably.
Yeah. Most likely, definitely. It's a tough one there, but yeah, we'll definitely keep following that one. And to stay on brand of NFL and college like we have so often on the headlines here, Texas quarterback Quinn Ewers has declared officially for the 2025 NFL Draft per ESPN. Talked about this a couple times now with some different guys. We talked about it when Jalen Milroe declared. We talked about it when Carson Beck declared. What happened with Carson Beck? Now he's at Miami. I don't know where the transfer portal window is looking like right now, but it looks like these verbal commitments have had people maybe flip opposite way, a la Cam Ward. But now in this situation, I think we're a little bit closer to the draft. I think it might be a full send commit here for Quinn Ewers, who's putting up the pads in college for Austin and the Texas Longhorns. What are you thinking as far as Quinn Ewers now officially declaring for the NFL draft and now the future of Texas, even with Arch Manning?
Yeah, I guess the future of Texas, like you and I talked about before, I guess either way it was going to be the Arch show here going forward for our friends out there in Austin. But the Quinn declaring, it's not so surprising just because there was so much smoke and he had the Thamel interview where he says he doesn't expect to be playing college football next year. But we said it before on this show, Cato, I don't love this for Quinn Ewers when it comes to his NFL career. Now, I'm not a quarterback guru. I'm not an NFL scout. But people in those worlds are saying, hey, he's not ready. He needs more time in college. He needs to develop this, and this. And so I don't love this move. I'm on record saying I think Notre Dame would have made a world of sense to go play for Mike Denbrock and have more experience. And, oh, by the way, play for Mike Denbrock, the guy who developed Jaden Daniels like we just alluded to. So there's so much there. To me, it feels like a thing where maybe he's getting information that none of us are getting, and he believes he can be a higher draft pick than we think, or he believes that this is going to be his best chance when it comes to this quarterback class, and he thinks he has a chance to go higher than maybe he would and make some more money than he would if he were to come back for another year. Don't know if that's the case, but that's how it feels to me. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, we both align here. I think us and many other people were at the NFL level, as evaluators were saying Quinn Ewers should come back. We're going to throw up his stats here.
Yeah.
Obviously, a long college career, you can make it even longer, and I think that's something that's become more and more attractive to the NFL level, but obviously not the year that he wanted to have this year through half of his career interceptions this season. He looked a little bit banged up as well. We thought hitting the portal would be a great move. It's obviously something that you get a wrench thrown into when you make the college football playoff, but I think for Quinn Ewers, it's going to be very interesting to see now that we know that this is happening. We think, at least allegedly at the moment, going to be very interesting to see where he goes. This is a guy who was a 5-star quarterback prospect out of high school. People were calling him the best recruit of all time. This is a guy who had a lot of hype surrounding him. He obviously has the talent, not necessarily the production that you'd want to see in this last season. I think a team might reach a little bit higher to get him in that second or third round and feel like they can fix Quinn and get the most out of him, maybe have him sit behind a veteran. So I'm more fascinated to see with where he goes now. But I agree with you. It would have been really cool for just Quinn in college football to see him land at a Notre Dame. We had some Notre Dame fans give some pushback there as far as
they were not happy.
Ewers. They believe in our guy Peanut Butter and Jelly at quarterback over there. But I think maybe going to a UNC with a Bill Belichick. There was just a lot of different things that were murmurs and talked about as far as Quinn Ewers. But now that you know he's actually staying, or for now at least not leveraging it in an NIL perspective, it'll be interesting to see where he goes in that NFL draft for sure.
It's gonna be wild, man. It's gonna be wild. I mean, I think like you just said, the whole Carson Beck, I'm going to the league, psych, sleight of hand, I'm going to go play at another school via the portal. I think that's gonna happen more. I don't know how the actual rules work around the calendar right now for Quinn Ewers, because I believe the deadline for him with how they played the game, when was that? That was January 10th. They have a 5-day window. So if it's been past 5 days, I don't think Quinn Ewers is eligible to jump into the portal. Unless, I guess, he's a grad, then I guess he could jump into the portal. But I'm not sure how that works in relation to grad transfers and the ruling around announcing their intentions to enter the portal. Yeah, so, I mean, like the Ohio State game was played on the 10th. It's been over 5 days as of now. He would have had to pop up in the portal here pretty soon. A lot there. But, yeah, I mean, I think we're on the same page. I'd be surprised if he did the do-si-do and jumped off the ropes and ended up back in college next year.
We don't know everything about those rules, but speaking of rules, there's one that was talked about this week around the fake injuries that we saw a little bit in the college football season. Guys go down, not really hurt, trying to burn some clock, help their team out as far as getting maybe some rest on the play during a play for the hurry up. Yahoo Sports' Ross Dellinger reported from the AFCA convention in Charlotte about the discussions surrounding a rule for fake injuries during games in an attempt to slow down faking or feigning injuries. Dellinger says any injured player would be sidelined for the rest of the drive, and coaches could use a timeout to reinstate the player. That is a rule that's being talked about. Seems like a pretty good solution to a problem that we thought maybe couldn't even have a solution. But what are your thoughts here as far as this rule and kind of a thing that Ole Miss notably made a little bit famous in the SEC this year as far as faking injuries during a game?
It makes so much sense. It makes so much sense to do it this way, because what you can't do is throw a penalty flag. Like, I think that was a lot of folks' knee-jerk reaction was, just flag them when they're clearly faking an injury. It's like, well, how are you going to tell someone without a shadow of a doubt that they didn't just pop their Achilles when they went down looking to the sideline to get the play call, and now they're on there? Like, it's very, very difficult to throw a penalty flag based on how someone physically feels that none of us can account for. Now, we can, see it pretty clear as day and say, hey, I don't know, man, he was walking fine before, walking fine after. This just makes all the sense in the world where, hey, you have to call a timeout because a injury of that sort being faked is essentially accomplishing the same thing. We're just going to make sure that you have to pay the piper to help yourself get aligned or whatever it may be, and also the player can't come in I believe it not reinstated unless they take a timeout. Is that correct?
Yeah, they said a timeout would be what puts a player back in the
Makes
game.
a lot of sense, man.
Yeah, with three timeouts, I think that's going to be a tough decision for some people. I think this is a good way of cutting through a problem that felt impossible to solve. You can't throw a penalty or get a medical person in and say, this injury is fake or not, and kind of a lot of blurred lines there for sure. And you never want to accuse someone of faking an injury if they are actually hurt, because that's the worst case scenario. The only devil's advocate I'll play here is there are certain injuries maybe that are like a play or two. What if in a tight game, your middle linebacker, no timeouts in the fourth quarter, gets the wind knocked out of him and thinks he's about to die out there? I've been in that position for sure, where I've got the wind knocked out of me. I'm thinking I'm about to puncture a lung and taking my last breaths on the football field, but I could be back in there the next play. What if a finger pops out for an offensive lineman, goes to the sideline, gets a pop back in, wants to hop back in the game? I think those are kind of small scenarios where it might be problematic, but I think overall I agree with you. This is a good way of solving the problem. Maybe designated injury timeout would be better. You get one of those a game you can burn maybe versus your 3 timeouts, because I think with just 3 timeouts, some guys can maybe cramp and stuff like that if it is actually a hot game in week 1. I think it could get a little bit messy, but we'll see how it goes. I think this is a good thing. It's not an official rule yet, but it's something that's being talked about, and it's definitely something we'll continue tracking here.
I'm with you. I'd be surprised if that didn't become a reality for next season. 100%.
Yeah. Good
100%.
call there. Good call. Whoever came up that one, shout out to you for sure. Going a little bit and dabbling and dipping our toe in the national championship here. Brian Kelly rooting for Notre Dame. We got a report from Brandon Marcello, who's told by Brian Kelly that he is rooting for Notre Dame in the national championship. Obviously spent 12 years at Notre Dame before, packing his bags and heading to the Bayou. He also addressed the backlash of leaving the Irish. Here's the quote here from Brian Kelly. A lot of the guys there that are on both sides of the ball, I recruited. Obviously, I want to see those guys win it all, and I think they're in a great position. Totally excited for those guys. Kelly added, I wasn't leaving Notre Dame because I couldn't win a national championship. You can win championships at Notre Dame, but I chose another path because I wanted a different challenge. Do you believe that Brian Kelly is just rooting against Ryan Day and cheering for Notre Dame in this spot here? I don't know if I can believe that one, man.
Dude, what a week for former Notre Dame coaches between Lou Holtz and Brian Kelly stringing together, just quote graphics for the folks, staying in the discussion as we move into the national championship game. To me, this is all about, how do you feel about your ex? Was it a messy breakup? Okay, then you probably don't want to see them do well. Are y'all still friends? Y'all are still in the same friend group. It's okay. It was mutual. It was amicable. Okay, well then, yeah, go have success. Go win the national championship. From what I can gather, I think that Brian Kelly and him pivoting out of Notre Dame, it was definitely messy on the Notre Dame side in terms of how they felt about it. I don't know that Brian Kelly has all this, this malintent for Notre Dame or has these bad feelings towards Notre Dame. I also think it's very interesting now, that quote you just read. I don't think he included that first line by accident, saying, oh, yeah, I recruited a lot of those guys. Looking around, full stop. I recruited a lot of those guys, and I hope they have success. I don't think it was maybe as obvious as I'm making it sound, but I don't think he said, yeah, I recruited a lot of those guys that are now playing for a national championship. Just saying, subtle pat on the back there, and I'm here for it, but I don't think it's so bad on the Brian Kelly side. I think it's probably more on the Notre Dame side, but I don't think he would be that upset if Ohio State were to boat race Notre Dame either.
Yeah, I think the optics that surrounded that breakup, if we want to call it that, were a little bit more outside looking in. There was more problems there than I guess with Brian Kelly himself and the transition he made there. But you mentioned it and called it a breakup, and it matters about how you break up. I think there's a small part of it too where you mentioned if you really take a deep dive on the quote, like you mentioned, the players that were getting recruited, well, when all those players are gone, is he going to all of a sudden be rooting against Notre Dame? Is it the players that he's with that he's rooting for, or take it a couple of years from now, Notre Dame's back in that position? Okay, now I won't be rooting for them because the players are there that I didn't recruit. But I think the other side of this too is, all right, what if Notre Dame does win this national title and then maybe they go back to back? Maybe they win 2 in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years. Is Brian Kelly still rooting for him at that point? Because I think at that point you can break up with an ex and have a perfectly amicable, hey, this is not our time, we need to break up. But if that ex all of a sudden starts really, really bossing up to the next level, she starts getting her bag up, she's the CEO of a company, she's doing it bigger and better than she ever was with you, then I think you could hold face and be, hey, I'm happy for them. But I think deep down inside, you put them on the lie detector test, you put Brian Kelly on the lie detector test. If Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman start building something real special here, like we think they can do, I don't know if we're getting that same energy from Brian Kelly. So I think the upset nature of them kind of beating a Georgia, beating a Penn State, making it to this stage has a lot to do with it. But if Notre Dame's the next dynasty, I don't think Brian Kelly is going to be too remiss to be giving his flowers to Marcus Freeman in that program the same way you wouldn't be if your girlfriend bossed up tenfold on you if you had a breakup.
No, go be great. Just don't be that great.
Don't be too great.
Be good. I think it also matters too, Kay, to who broke up with who. If Brian Kelly was fired here, I don't think he'd be saying this. I think it'd be yeah, Notre Dame kick rocks. But he was no, actually, I broke up with them. I wish them the best. I hope they're happy. Hope their life is good. Win 1 natty. Yeah, for my guys, I'm happy for you. You go win, like you just said, you win 3 natties, go win 2. I mean, any number of more than 1 national championship is all right now. That's about enough. It's about enough.
Yeah, that'll be interesting one. I think if Notre Dame wins this game, Lou Holtz and the man, Brian Kelly, Might have a little conversation. Hey, man, what are we doing here?
What a combo.
What are we doing
What
here?
an absolute combo.
What are we
dude.
doing here, guys? But last thing, speaking of some legends to close out the headlines today, the College Football Hall of Fame class of 25 has been revealed. A lot of notable names on there. You have a Nick Saban, a Urban Meyer, a Michael Vick, Monte Ball, Michael Strahan. What's your reaction to this, JD, with this new class coming up? And I think my gut reaction was, man, I'm getting old. This is when you were growing up watching football, there's Hall of Fame players you never heard of. Next thing you know, they're the dudes you were once looking up to, just watching do it at the highest level.
It's like the credits rolling a little bit on a certain chapter, you know? Like I think a lot of us grew up, especially when it comes to what the NFL was for I think both of us being kids that grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. It's like that number 7 Michael Vick jersey in the red is like you saw that everywhere, dude. So for him to be now enshrined into the College Football Hall of Fame, and then Nick Saban and what he is as a staple of the sport, like all those things, it does feel like, man, this is kind of the end of an era. And the thing that's the kicker for me, Cato, is you pair this with all of the great players, juniors that exist out there. Like Donovan McNabb Jr. is someone that now exists, and we're having to talk about in the world of like where he could end up as a recruit. Or the same deal, like Adrian Peterson has a kid, and I think his highlights are out there on the On3 high school account.
They're
like
out
he's
there.
He's a savage, dude.
The highlights are crazy.
Like offer that kid tomorrow. So seeing like the spawn of these great players, whether it be collegiate or pro, that to me is really like, dang, okay, yeah, this is what it's like to be on the doorstep of, you know, being old or being old in general.
Yeah, I do want to shout out the College Football Hall of Fame too for just letting it go quick. The fact that Nick Saban's already in this class, just not wasting any time, I think that's awesome. I think when you look at the NFL side of things, you have to wait your turn. There's a lot more of a process in other sports, but college football, if we have a legend on our hands, man, we won't waste any time in getting them in there. And I think it makes for these great classes where you have a guy like a Nick Saban here and a Michael Strahan and some of these worlds colliding. So yeah, shout out all those guys who definitely made it. Iconic guys that we grew up on and saw just as recently as last year coaching at the highest level as well when it comes to a guy like Nick Saban. But definitely excited for them and definitely excited to see which players now that we've been familiar with and grew up with and have had come up with this whole time continue to make it to the Hall of Fame for sure. JD, are you ready to talk about the national championship before we head out of here?
Let's do it, dude. Let's absolutely do it. Just kind of these final thoughts, if you will. Those of y'all that have tuned in with us throughout the season. We'll have some more content in Atlanta, so this is our final thoughts in a live capacity for you, at least when it comes to our Thursday show on the meetup that will be Ohio State Notre Dame on Monday night. For all the marbles, man. For all the marbles. Got marbles in my mouth as I say that out loud. But with that being said, when I talk about Ohio State, my final thoughts, Cato, I got 2 takes. One is I have a very difficult time believing that one individual is going to beat Ohio State. Like, as good as Jeremiah Smith is, as ridiculous as his run has been, the Texas game to me makes me believe that, okay, there is a blueprint out there. There is a world where this Notre Dame defense, as scrappy as they are on the back end, top 5 in America in yards per pass allowed per game or yards per game allowed period through the air. I think that, I don't know if they take him away, but I do think it's a thing where it's got to be Egbuka, it's got to be Henderson, it's got to be G. Scott, it's got to be all these different weapons for Will Howard to where kind of potluck style, kind of death by 1,000 cuts, if you will, with what they do offensively. So I'd be shocked if we saw the Jeremiah Smith explosion for 3 touchdowns. That's not me saying I'd be surprised if he had a good game. I would just be surprised if it was Jeremiah Smith was the only guy that could beat Notre Dame, and that's why they won the football game. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think they really flexed their muscles last game. The fact that Jeremiah Smith had 1 catch for 3 yards and they were still looking like pretty much a well-oiled machine on offense until Texas kind of started holding their ground up in that run defense. But I agree with you. We're obviously going to see something between that probably and the Rose Bowl explosion and the explosion in the Tennessee game. And I think it just speaks to the weaponry of this team. I think one of the fascinating things to talk about that we talked about this week from a matchup perspective is Notre Dame and that excellent secondary that's banged up and really answered the call to action and played great throughout these playoffs. Are they going to be able to play man coverage against all these guys? I think it's been made very clear that Ohio State has enough guys over there. The fact that Carnell Tate's your leading receiver last game, he steps up to the plate. You have Ibuka. You have the running backs out of the backfield as well, getting involved in the pass game. There's a lot to account for. Are they going to play man coverage, or are they going to take a page out of Texas's book, maybe switch some things up and limit this offense a little bit as best they can by giving a variety of looks to Will Howard? If I'm the defensive coordinator here and I am a man principle guy when it comes to what I've been calling this whole season, I'm going up against a juggernaut like we've seen in Ohio State offensively. I'm trying to make things as hard as I can for Will Howard. We're disguising things. We're doing exotic looks. We're running Tampa 2, cover 3, cover 6. Whatever number you got, we're running the coverage. We're on cover 9 if we have to. You know what I mean? So we're going to do whatever we can to make things as hard hard as possible. And this is a national championship game. You know the players are going to unload the clip and do what they have to do to leave it all out there. I'm curious to see if the coordinators, especially on the Notre Dame side, really on both sides of the ball, are going to give the whole kitchen sink in this matchup and try to make things as hard as they can for Ohio State when you talk about the Notre Dame coordinators as well.
A little cover 9 Velcro action for all the college football 25 or NCAA 14 fans out there. Okay, I like it. Dial it up, Cato. Dial up a little coverage action. I love that. My other take on Ohio State, if Ryan Day and Ohio State do what they are expected to do on Monday night and cover that spread and they beat Notre Dame, I think that Ryan Day should have a clean slate with the Buckeye faithful. Now, I think this is classic forgive, don't forget. Like, I'm not saying it's okay if you lose to Michigan for the 5th time in a row, but I also think with the gauntlet they've had to go through, we talked about on this show a lot, Caden, that there's got to be some like, hey, the Michigan thing sucks, but we just won a national championship, and we have Ryan Day in a large way to thank for it. The talent's there, of course, all that's there, but to put it all together and to pivot the way they've pivoted over the course of the last several years to get to this spot, I think he needs to have a clean slate with the Buckeye fans. I'm not saying it's all sunshine and roses when they play Michigan the next time, but I do think it's got to be like, hey, we're good. Or are we feeling great about Michigan? But no, we're good, and the slate is clean as far as we're concerned. Jumping into next year. No bad vibes.
It's great that you want that, JD, but I think expecting it is just there's no way to expect that's going to happen next year. I don't think so, man. I think they could win the national championship game the same way Georgia beat TCU a couple years. But when we get to that last game of the regular season, and then in back they have the pen where you look at it and erases the memory. I don't think there's fans in Columbus. There's fans in Columbus that just wouldn't work against. I think you could hit them with it 1,000 times.
Yeah.
You could hit them with it 4 times to forget the last 4 losses against Michigan, and it's not going to happen. I think that game. There's some sickos out there in Columbus who would rather take a Michigan win over a national title. I genuinely feel like it's one of the few fan bases where it means that much. You and me both know we're Ryan Day guys. We believe he's a head coach. If you can't go over this one hump, I'm taking the natty every time. But it's gonna be interesting regardless, win or loss in this game, to just see the anticipation ratchet up yet again for a game that's going to be on the road, maybe against a true freshman quarterback over there at Michigan. It's going to be fascinating to watch regardless, but I don't think the Ohio State fans, they will take their victory lap for sure, but they can take that victory lap everywhere but Ann Arbor. No matter what, if they're the national champions this year, Michigan's going to have that but. You won the national championship. You went on arguably the hardest run to that national championship in the postseason that we've ever seen, but we still beat you, and we beat you after we won a national championship when we were down bad. Now y'all won the national championship. Congrats. Now we're out now even in that department. But when y'all meet us on the field, when y'all come to Ann Arbor in the Big House next year, you're going to know we have your number, and it's going to just only add to the anticipation of that matchup. Could you imagine that? I don't know. We have to pull out the history books here, but has there been a year where Michigan's won the national title, then Ohio State's won it, and then they meet again in that game that they meet in every year? I think that might be a first.
I would have to check, but that would absolutely juice that game up even more than it already has been juiced up. I just have such a hard time believing that Ohio State and Ryan Day's like approval rating is, again, I'm not saying it's 100%, but I do think it needs to at least be a spot where, hey, we're even. Not we're going to build you a statue, not that we're going to, rename the field after you, but I do think it's some of like, hey, that was whack what happened these last 4 years, but we'll take this natty and we'll get back to what this thing is when we play Michigan in our. Dude, if they lose again, though, again, I'm not saying that they forget what happened. I do think there's something to that, but there's got to have some give and take here. But I guess that's why we love the sport. I got 2 thoughts on Notre Dame, and I want to hear what you have to say about this whole thing before we get out of here on this phenomenal Chop It Up Thursday. Dude, I think the Notre Dame physicality is being overlooked. I really do. Like, I think it's so easy to talk about the injuries and talk about their schedule and all this and that. And it's like, dude, I've just seen them now play 2 teams that they are not supposed to be on the field with from a talent perspective. On the field is a strong way to put it. At a talent disadvantage between Georgia and Penn State. And they were the bully in both those spots. Now, Penn State got theirs on the ground, but like Notre Dame is not shying away at all. So I think Ohio State's going to be ready for this one, but if they're not ready for a street fight and they get that first cold clock into the jaw, like it's going to be a very interesting next couple of quarters if the physicality of Notre Dame takes them by surprise, and I think that's within the realm of possibility. That's my first thought. The second thought is kind of aligned with that, so I just wanted to make sure we had this out there. The quarterback run is the secret sauce for Notre Dame. It is. We talked about Riley Leonard and all that's required of him in this game and in this spot. You have got to get the mean, the Prize Picks number we talked about, 36.5 yards, it's got to be like, I think, darn near double that, Caden. I really believe that. I think it's got to be in the ballpark of 70-ish yards for Notre Dame to win the ball game. Call it early, call it often, be in position to call it on short yardage and third down. If you're, third and long and we got problems, it has to be a factor. The floor is yours, Cato. What do you think about this one?
Yeah, I agree with you. You called your shot with this Notre Dame defense, and I want to give you your shout out there and your flowers. We were drafting units heading into this postseason, and you picked Notre Dame's defense to much of a question mark from me and some other people in the comments. But look at them now. They've taken this team all the way to the national title, and I think their physicality has a lot to do with that. And they've been physical on the offensive side of the ball, too. You mentioned that Jeremiah Love run that I cannot stop thinking about earlier this week, where he's just willing his way on one knee into the goal line. That just epitomizes what this Notre Dame team has been. The question is going to be, can that be enough to make up for the talent gap in this game? They've been able to do it the last 2 games in this college football playoff. I just don't think it'll be enough in this one. I think it might be underrated, but I think this might sound crazy, but I think even though Ohio State physicality has become underrated just because that's the major talking point we can have with Notre Dame. We can talk about, hey, Ohio State's more talented. They throw for more yards. They pass for more yards. Their defense is even better. Every area of this game, Ohio State checks the boxes as far as winning the matchup. So because of that, the narrative around Notre Dame has been about those intangibles, the physicality, the discipline. But I think that's almost taken away from the fact that Ohio State has had that too in this run. And I think that's the reason why they beat Texas. That defense is flying around. The defense I drafted, at least, in that draft that we did. And I think their physicality has almost been slept on. You talk about those guys up front are absolute monsters. We talk about how many defensive guys are on that side of the ball. Maybe all 11 will end up getting drafted eventually, whether it's between this year, next year, and the year after that. But I think because of that, these guys aren't these prospects because they don't have effort, because they don't play physical. They have all those things too. And that's why I think I favor Ohio State so much in this game, because I think more than we probably give them credit for on the Ohio State side of things. They've paid for the roster. They do whatever they do to get to this place they've gotten to at this point now. They've done it the same way Notre Dame has, just from a physicality standpoint. They're just doing it at a level that is higher and more supreme because they're more talented. So it's going to be curious. It's going to take a Herculean effort, I think, from Notre Dame, as you mentioned as well, from Riley Leonard. I think it's going to take a ton from him. If he plays the best game of his career, there's still a universe where he might lose this game. And we've seen that a ton in this playoffs. Cam Scatterby played the game of his life against Texas, and they still came up short in that game. So I hope Riley Leonard plays as good as he can to keep this game close. And same with Notre Dame. They're going to have to help him out a lot. But I think overall, we're both picking Ohio State this game, and I think it is for a reason for most people too. The spread looks the way it does for a reason, and this Buckeyes team might go down, I think, if they win this title and win it resoundingly, as one of the best college football rosters we've seen in quite some time.
Oh, there's no way around it. No way around it, especially if they do it, like you just said, a definitive fashion. The running backs, man. The running backs could be kind of that X factor here for the Buckeyes against that Notre Dame defense, based on watching the Penn State deal. But, man, it's going to be a lot of fun. We say it every single show, but it's going to be a lot of fun. Cato, I appreciate you chiming in, brother, and bringing the juice, bringing the takes, bringing the intel, the expertise to the hard count. Again, Cato. Caden Smith is the legal name. We call him Cato on this show, bringing everything you see here to the table. What else is bringing back to the table is our friends over at Axia bringing you the hard count today and bringing absolute fire to the college football playoff. Axia time. The official timepiece of the college football playoff and the Heisman Trophy. They've got something cooking here for this national title game. You heard me talk about the special timepieces that they've had cooked up for this college football playoff. Well, they got some extra here for this national title game. The Axia time has new designs ready to be released for the winning team. Now, if you go in and snag one of those, a little surprise in there, a couple of surprises in addition to the 3 ultra custom designs with some other things to go with it. They've got some confetti from the celebration in Atlanta that will be included in the box. So if you're a Notre Dame fan or an Ohio State fan and have not yet purchased one of these watches, you might want to do it because you'll be able to lock in your savings and still qualify for the upgrade guarantee that includes all of the surprises. So check them out at axiatime.com. That's AXIAtime.com. And use code HARDCOUNT at checkout to get 10% off your order. Appreciate Axia Time and appreciate y'all being dialed in, man. We went about an hour and a half today, dude. It's a long show. It's a big show. Guess what? It's a big game. It's that time of year, man. It's our last chance we get to be live before we jump into the madness that will be everything that comes after the national championship game. Now, I say the last time we're live, last time in like a consistent capacity that we've had all season long. Obviously, we're going to try to get you some live content down there in Atlanta, But the next Tuesday live show, man, we'll be talking about the season that was. We'll probably be somewhere in Atlanta for that. But I cannot wait. And from us to you, before we play this final game, thank you for everything y'all have brought to us this season. I know everyone tuned in right now is a sicko when it comes to the sport, sicko when it comes to the show, and y'all are what makes it what it is. So we appreciate you for that. We got one more in us. Shout out Vince Carter. We got one more in us, and we're going to make it count. So for Cato on the ones and twos, bringing the production as well as the juice on the mic, for myself, JD PicKell, we appreciate y'all. We love y'all. We're going to keep this party rolling, and we will see y'all